again in one of our meetings to discuss scientific research. Today, after finishing talking about descriptive research, quantitative research, we'll start talking about a different kind of research, which is qualitative research. Just ahead of start, all kinds of research are interchangeable. They work together in order to enable researchers to add to the fields of study, as I mentioned in the beginning of the series of talking about scientific research. So while I was talking about descriptive research, I mentioned that we have kind of mixed studies when we integrate formative studies, rich study which is very informative to all fields of study, or I mean to the readers of our studies. Again, today we are going to talk about qualitative research. It will be just an introduction about the kinds of this approach, because it has many types. We said that with descriptive studies, we have two basic kinds of studies, which are mainly descriptive or inferential. And I said that personally, I prefer descriptive studies because I think, I mean, I'm not a kind of a number person, but still maybe some studies will require doing inferential statistics. Personally, I prefer descriptive studies because they are, I mean, maybe closer to the reader. If the reader is not a kind of a number person, he will understand what we are up to. And the main purpose of doing research is that we understand the world around us in order to develop the fields of studies that we are specialized in. With the qualitative studies, the situation is different, and we'll know why. Because qualitative research locates the researcher in the world itself, which means that the researcher will be a part of the surroundings, part of the world, which is the main difference between quantitative and qualitative research. Again, with qualitative research, quantitative research, numbers, it means that we are dealing with numbers. It means that the whole process of doing research is objective, which is why, I mean, in both kinds of studies, the researcher is required to give us his voice. We'd like to know his contribution to the field of study, unlike the misunderstanding of Iraqi researchers, or maybe our supervisors, including myself, they keep telling us, we don't need to hear what you are saying. We need to hear what the books are saying. No, this is not right. This is not right, because the purpose of doing research is that we would like to place ourselves as researchers in the world, as researchers in the academic environment. That's why the I pronoun is very necessary. We need to hear this part. It's fine that we talk about other researchers. How did they do the studies in the past? We base our studies on them, but still, what is our role then? We have a voice, so we have to state our point of view. But the difference is that our voice is not that clear with the quantitative studies, just like in qualitative studies. Qualitative studies, they are mainly subjective. So the researcher himself is part of the research study, which is kind of fun for me. I see it's fun. With the quantitative studies, it's kind of objective. We give our points of view from every now and then, but the main purpose is that we are investigating the perspectives of the participants. We are not that, I mean, kind of part of the process of research. In qualitative studies, no, it's different. We are part of that process because we are taking part in it. So the qualitative studies, they locate the researcher in the world itself. Then what is this process? The process of qualitative research, it turns the world around us into a series of representations, which means that we have several ways of collecting data. All these resources are just in front of us. For example, we have field notes. You just go to the environment. Where do you want to find the, where do you want to do the research? And then take notes by observation. This is one of the ways to collect data. Interviews. You are interacting face-to-face with participants. So we have interviews. Conversations. We are just talking to people. And then we have photographs. We can also use photographs in our research. Records, archives, or memos, even diaries. We can investigate all of these things. Saying that, it means that we have several approaches to qualitative research. And I'll explore with you, I'll walk you through all these kinds of approaches, the characteristics of these approaches, and then we'll talk about how to collect data in detail. Because each one of these approaches, they may be similar in one way or another. They may interact with each other, but still, each one of them has its own characteristics. The first approach is called the narrative approach. And just a reminder, people who were with me in the previous lectures, we said that sometimes Iraqi researchers, they have the misunderstanding that what they are doing in a qualitative research is that they say that we are doing qualitative part of the study. Where is the qualitative part of the study? They think that when they interpret numbers, when they interpret the statistical part of the study, they are doing qualitative research. Well, no. Interpreting the results is still part of the process of doing a quantitative study. Qualitative studies, they are totally different. And here's why. We have different approaches, and each one has its own methodology. It's different. So a narrative approach, it's basically interviews with participants regarding a specific issue, and the researcher will reflects upon them. That's why the researcher is part of that process. Let me give you an example in order to facilitate understanding this type of research. For example, so here we have a vast range of participants. The sample, you can have a very large sample from different parts. Let's take Iraq, for example. I'll say, for example, I'd like to investigate what mothers think about motherhood. So this is a wide project, and then my sample will be wide. I have flexibility. I can go to Mosul, I can go to Basra, I can go to Babylon, I can go to any province in Iraq, and then investigate, start the process by interviewing mothers, talking to them, and then they will all share their experiences about this issue, motherhood, or difficulties faced by mothers with teenagers, let's say. So my sample is large, and the issue is shared between participants. What are the characteristics of narrative studies? The researcher here in this kind of a study, and from its name, narrative, it means that you will sit and you will have, or maybe you'll interview people, and then they'll start talking, saying maybe stories, telling different reflections about their lives, what they go through, etc. So the characteristics of narrative studies, the first one is that the researcher collects his stories from individuals or documents about lived experiences. So again, back to our example about mothers, we can interview mothers, even in our neighborhood. Let's say that I'd like to do this research, and instead of going to different provinces, I have Baghdad. It's a very large city, and I have several neighborhoods. I can say that I'd like to interview mothers in Baghdad. And then I'll state in my description of the setting of the research that in Baghdad, we have several neighborhoods, several parts of the city. I'll go to the north of Baghdad versus south of Baghdad, etc. So this is the description of my environment. So I can collect stories from individuals or from documents. Let's say that maybe I have records in one of the, let's say the Ministry of, what is it called? The Ministry of Human Care or something, الرعاية الاجتماعية, social care, okay, social care. I have access to these records, and I say that in the methodology section, collecting data, I'll go to this ministry, I have access to the archives, and then we have this set of documents, and I will start by collecting data, looking at these documents and seeing the experiences of these mothers. Or maybe I can investigate maybe the experience of, let's say, employees in the Ministry of Higher Education, or the experiences of, let's say, hard workers or laborers. Let's say laborers. So I can say we have records of laborers in the Ministry of Social Care. Such and such people, they take such and such, social care from the government, etc. So these are the things that we can do in narrative studies. The characteristic of this kind of qualitative research is that the narrative stories can be analyzed thematically, structurally, or dialogically. Maybe some of the other kinds of qualitative research, as we'll see later, they share these features together. All of them, in all of the kinds of qualitative research, we can, analyze the data by themes. This is a common characteristic between all of these kinds, which means that I collected the data, I interviewed, let's say interviews. I interviewed several people. And then, by the way, the process of collecting data and analyzing data with the qualitative research is longer, and you need more efforts compared to qualitative research. Qualitative. Where did I stop? And what is this? Okay. We said when we collect data, the shared thing is that we can, we can use all these ways of collecting data with other types of qualitative research. The thing is that we use themes. We said with the qualitative research, we just give the surveys to participants, take them back, and then start by entering data into the Excel sheet. We create our code book, and then we start analyzing using SPSS. So SPSS basically will do all the job for us. Whereas in qualitative research, the thing is different. The efforts needed from the researcher is bigger. So we need to sit down, take all these data, and then start by looking. So this participant, let's go to our example back about motherhood. This participant said that teenagers ages 10 to 14 are difficult to deal with. So we'll see, for example, we have 40 participants, 35 out of 40, they said the same thing. So we'll collect that, we'll say that 34 or 35 of these participants said that teenagers from this age to this age are difficult to deal with. This is one of the themes that we've got. And then we have answers from these participants. We can take them, copy paste, and then select them aside. So it means that you have to change the interview because you have a recorder, and then you recorded all the interviews. Then you have to transcribe them, which means that you have to turn the sound into writing. First of all, you will sit down, you will write down all the interviews, and then you will start playing and taking out themes. So you create your themes, difficulties dealing with teenagers, for example, fun dealing with teenagers. Sometimes you have unexpected themes coming out. Sometimes only one person gives you an idea. You will put it aside. So we are looking for these things because we'll use it in analyzing our data. Then we have, for example, structural analysis, nature of telling the story. Some participants, they like to talk, let's say, in examples. This participant, he used a lot of examples. This participant, he used generalizations. These are just ideas. You may come up with different, things of analyzing data. The fun part of the qualitative research is that the researcher can play a lot with all these things. He can bring us new things to the field. That's why, the other thing is that dialogic, who the story is directed to. This is only another example of how to analyze the data. Some participants may direct the dialogue to, for example, I have a professor who is, the way he talks, it means that he directs his talk to males. Even if he's sitting with women, the way he talks is just directing the story to men. So this is one of the examples that we can analyze our data to. We can say these kinds of people, just like talking to kids when they say the story. This kind of people, they talk just like they are talking to adults, etc. Because human beings are different when they tell stories. That's why your analysis of the data will be different. We are done with narrative studies. Now, the other kind of qualitative research is called phenomenological approach. From the title, it means that we have a phenomenon and we are aiming to study it. So the phenomenological study describes the common meaning for several individuals of their lived experiences of a concept of a phenomenon. Well, I thought a lot of something from our real life in order to give you as an example of this type of qualitative studies. And I came up with the idea, if you came across the young people, youth, who used to wear torn out trousers. هاي البناطيل الكابوي المشققة. Well, this is a phenomenon. And then if you would like to study it, the cultural effect of, for example, the new fashion with youth or youth male in Iraq using or wearing those torn out trousers. So my sample will be youth who wear these trousers, or I can use youth and I can use shop owners who sell those kind of trousers. So I'll start by interviewing them and then asking them about their experiences as people who sell this product or as people who wear this product, and see why do they wear it, what do they like about it, what don't they like about it, things like that. This is just an example. So the characteristics of a phenomenological studies, it means that you have to explore the phenomenon. Another example from the academic environment, if we have, or maybe from our life, we have the phenomenon of COVID-19. This is a phenomenon shared by a lot of the whole world. So I can take a sample from everywhere, even virtual or in person. But first, I have to explore the phenomenon. I'll start by talking about this phenomenon. Where did it start? When did it start? What do I think the reasons are? Characteristics of this phenomenon, stories that I have heard, and then I'll move to my sample. So I'll say, for example, let's say Najaf, and I think, don't take me for that, but I think it started there. So Najaf was the first place where we got the first case of COVID-19 in Iraq. That's why I'm going to start my research there. So my sample will be a group of, let's say, students from the University of Najaf, and I'll ask them about their experience with COVID-19. So this is a phenomenon, and then I'm asking them about this phenomenon. This is the difference between a narrative study and a phenomenological study. Narrative study, the experience is wider. So COVID-19 is restricted, but motherhood is not a phenomenon. A phenomenon, it means that it's something that happens in a certain time and it may disappear or it may not be valid in the future. But for narrative studies, it's different since it's, the experience is going on, it may happen to other people as well. Another characteristic of phenomenological studies, the sample is a group of individuals, which is true for the COVID-19. Let's go back to the example of pants or trousers. My sample should be people who are wearing these pants or people who are selling this product. I cannot bring, for example, let's say old women or old men and ask them what do they think about these pants, unless I change the perspective and start asking them about what do they think about people who are wearing this product. This is different. Again, it's also a phenomenon. So this is the flexibility of the researcher with this. Sometimes we said, hold on, of phenomenological studies is that sometimes the researcher has to discuss a personal experience or personal experiences with the phenomenon, which is true for all other kinds of qualitative research, because usually when you start talking with people, interviewing people, for sure, they'll talk about their experiences. So it's true again about phenomenological studies. And as we see for COVID-19 example, for sure, people will talk about themselves if they got the virus, or about their friends, their loved ones, their family members, or stories that they've heard about in the media. Same case for any phenomenon that you would like to study. Another characteristic of phenomenological studies, which is related to data collection, is that interviewing is the basic way of collecting data, which is true for all kinds of collective or qualitative studies. But documents can be used as well. Again, if we are talking about the phenomenon of COVID-19, we can collect data from documents. For example, I am one of the personnel in the Department of Health. So I have access to all of these documents, or maybe I work in a hospital and I have documents about all of the cases of COVID-19 in a certain area in Iraq. So I'd like to do a research about this phenomenon. It is not necessarily, maybe people will not be or patients. That's why I have access to all of these documents and I can use them in order to collect data with anonymous cases. So I don't mention anything about the cases. I have all this information about the cases. I can talk about them, have my themes. For example, I can say some of the cases have diarrhea, some of other cases, they have severe coughing, etc. So I have created all of these themes without interviewing any people. So the thing is that you have the freedom to use any of the tools in order to collect data, but still the preferable thing is interview, because you cannot imagine how many or how much information you are getting from people if you sit face to face and then interview them. Another kind of qualitative research is called the grounded theory approach. Here, let's talk about one of the misunderstanding of theories or hypotheses, let's call it, with Iraqi researchers. If you go through several studies of Iraqi researchers, they'll state at the beginning the problem of the specifically in dissertations and theses. They'll state the problem of the study, hypotheses, without understanding. They are just putting the hypothesis and they know already what is the answer to this hypothesis. This is not the case with the kinds of studies that I talked about. Here, the thing is different. With all these, the other cases that I've put, specifically with the qualitative research, we don't know what's coming up. So we are interviewing all of these people. Maybe we have an idea about some of the aspects of the topic, but several people will give us different angles of the topic, unexpected sides. The grounded theory is that I have an idea about a general topic, and then I start by narrowing everything until I get to the end, and I have this hypothesis. For example, let's say we would like to investigate the experiences of e-learning in Iraqi universities. So we are not sure, or maybe let's talk about courses. This is more convenience. You remember that a couple of years ago, the minister tried to apply a unique experience in higher education by following not a yearly system of school years, but semesters. We don't know if this is, successful or unsuccessful in Iraqi universities. We have no idea. So we started by, we say that we'll do a grounded theory study because we would like to reach out to a hypothesis in this case. So what I'm going to do, either memoing, which means, memoing, it will be a part of this process because I'll be taking notes whenever I go and wherever I go. So note-taking will be part of the process of research. And then the other thing is that I'm going to interview heads of departments, theory approach. And we'll talk about this approach in detail later on, and in upcoming lectures. Another kind of qualitative research, and let me share the presentation with you again. It's called ethnographic research. Ethnographic, it means that you are in the middle of the community. These kinds of studies, they focus on the social behavior of the entire culture, of the entire group of people. Let me give you an example. For instance, I'd like to understand the, let's say, the family life of football players. So here, this is a group of people. It's a wide group of people. So I have to go to the community of players. I have to meet with them, sit with them, maybe visit them at their homes, even their homes. So it means that I have to be part of this community before doing the research, which means that ethnographic studies, they take longer than other kinds of studies. Anyway, the qualitative research, it may take longer than quantitative research, but specifically ethnographic studies, they take more in the cultural aspect of the community than other kinds of research. Which means that you have to extend contact with a given community, just like the example that I gave you about sport players. So you have to be part of this community. For example, if I'd like, since my background is linguistics, so let's say I'd like to understand or to study the dialects of, let's say, people in Mosul, because their way of using Arabic is different from other parts of Iraq, or maybe people in the south, and I compare them with people in Iraq. So I have to go there, live there at least for a month for my study. So I decide the time. So I say that I went to Basra and I stayed there for a time from this month to this month in order to live with them, talk with them, see them in different situations, how do they use language, and then by collecting data, then I have I can come back and study with my data and start analyzing it in order to come to the results. So the characteristics of ethnographic studies, it pays attention to day-to-day events. When I went to Basra and lived there, it means that I was part of that community. It's preferable because I'm going to do research about language. So I need to see how do they communicate in the marketplace. I'll go shopping and see how do they communicate, what vocabulary they are using. I visit homes. I go, for example, to women gathering, maybe religious gatherings. Just like now in Muharram, we can go to gatherings and see how do they communicate, what vocabulary they use. I can go, for example, to weddings and see the different kinds of vocabulary they use, etc. So these are just examples. Then participants directly or indirectly, they are not the participants, sorry, the researcher will be a part of the local events. Wherever you go, let's say I'm not doing my study in Iraq. I wanted to do it outside Iraq. Let's say, again, an example about language. I wanted to do my study and investigate the dialects of Arabic dialects in Morocco. It's totally different from other parts of the Arab homeland. It means that I planned to go there, to live there for a certain time, to be exposed to the community, be in touch with people, and then it means that within this time, any social event, any cultural event, I should have access to, because it will add to my research. It will be very useful to my research. So I'll be part of this cultural event. Another characteristic is that the research tools are less structured. When I talked about these examples, have you seen that I am just part of the community? I have observations, I can have interviews, I can have narratives. See, I drag you from all other kinds of qualitative research. I can have access to archives or documents. I can use photos, I can use diaries. See, all of these resources. So the sky is the limit. I have no limit for my tools of research. So I can use any of these things, any of these tools in order to get my data. Another thing is that observation is purposeful. It's different when I do a phenomenological study from an ethnographic study. So ethnographic study is for this purpose, to drag from cultural aspects of the society, to drag from the traditions, the rituals. Whereas in phenomenological study is different because we have only one point, that's it, okay? Another characteristic is that ethnographic studies, they develop complete description of the culture of a group. Just like what I said, since I was part of this community, I lived in this community, so my theoretical background should include something about this community. And it will happen, you will like it or not, you have to, I mean, it will happen naturally. Because when you do this study, when you collect all this data, you are part of the process, you have to speak about the community. So I lived in this area, I noticed that the people do such and such and such. So unconsciously, you are describing the community, you are describing its culture, its environment, its setting. It will come naturally. The last kind here with the qualitative research is called the case study, which is somehow related to phenomenological studies. It's somehow related to ethnographic studies, but it's smaller. So the ethnographic study is the larger one among all other kinds of qualitative research. Case study is the smaller one, the smallest one, let's say. With a case study, we are studying a case within real life settings. So the case should be very limited. It can be one person. And let me say something here. When I came back to Iraq from the United States and I started submitting research papers to be published in Iraq, in fact, I got reviews from, from the magazine or journals, and the comments from the reviewers says, why do you have only 5 participants? Why do you have only 2 participants? Well, it's the method of research requires this. I understand that qualitative research, and preferably in Iraq, they prefer it to be, the sample larger than 50 participants. Well, this is not applicable in qualitative research because we need to do longer investigation of the data. We have interviews, a lot of data. We have transcriptions of these interviews. So I cannot have more than, the limits. I cannot have more than, let's say, 10 participants. And 10 is a lot. So it's natural for qualitative studies to have only 1 participant because we have long narratives. And remember that we are doing short studies. For researchers who are doing short studies, it's natural to have 1 participant, 2, sometimes 5, it's fine. If you have larger samples, it means that you are doing a very large study which is applicable to dissertations and theses. It's fine. You can have more than, 5 participants for dissertations and theses. It doesn't make sense to have 1 participant. But for a study which is short, 20 or 25 pages, you don't need a lot of participants. Because of the limitations of the and limitation of the papers itself. The requirements of journals, they do not accept more than 30 pages, let's say. So hopefully this misunderstanding will be removed in the future, hopefully. Anyways, the characteristics of case studies. The case to be studies may be an individual, just like I said, you can have 1 participant. A small group, let's say I can have 1 class in the University of Baghdad English department. This is a case. I can interview them, and my interview will be shorter. And it could be an organization also. So I can study a case study or in the University of Baghdad specifically, or the University of Babylon, or the Ministry of Higher Education, or a company, an oil company. So this is a case study. Or a project. It's also applicable if you would like to do a case study about a specific project. For example, an excavation of a historical area in the historical site of Babylon. So I'd like to do a case study. See, it's very specific. Another characteristic of case studies is that data can be collected in various ways. Here also, the sky is the limit. You have archives, you have documents, maybe a case study about the successful experience of e-learning in the University of Baghdad, the Department of English, but I focus on the part of exams only. So I don't need to interview students or interview teachers. I need only the documents. Let's say I'm a teacher and I have access to all the exam papers of my students. So by the end of the year, I have all this pile of papers, so I can go over them and see what is successful, what is unsuccessful about, e-learning and e-exams. The characteristic is that case studies involve interactions, communications, relationships, and practices between the case and the wider world and vice versa, which is applicable to all other kinds of qualitative studies in my point of view, because all of them, almost all of them, they involve interviews, which means in-person, person-to-person communication. The last thing is that data may be collected over an extended period of time or an intense period of time. Just like what I said, the flexibility the researcher has differs from his role in doing qualitative research. And in qualitative research, I mean, you can do it just like this, fast. But with qualitative study, you get to choose. If maybe sometimes I got bored from one of the studies and I decided to stop. But sometimes in an ethnographic study, I have fun and I'd like to discover more about the culture, about the society. And I think that this will add more to my study, which is why I decided to extend the period of time. I'm not in a rush, so I can end this process of collecting data in 6 months, or I can extend it to a year. Let's say I'm studying this community and I wanted to know how do they treat their kids after graduation from college. So I have to wait 4 other months until the graduation and another month to see what is different in dealing with those kids after graduation. See, so I got to decide. I have the flexibility. I'm free to do all of this because I am part of the research process. So these are the main kinds of qualitative research. Next time, we got to talk about how to collect data again and how to analyze these data. And I'll give you examples about all of these things. So now I'd like to ask if you have any question or comment or suggestion. And don't forget to register using the following link. I'll post it again.